within just 1 minute. I think since the 19th century, the reform movement has played a fundamental role in planting the seeds of modernity in the Islamic world. When I speak about the reformist movement of Al-Afghani, Abdu, Rashid Rida, in two aspects. At the intellectual level, by adapting new terms and concepts in the major languages of Islam, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. Due to the reformist movement, the Islamic discourse succeed to seed in planting the seeds of modernity in the Islamic discourse by adapting new concepts, new terms within the great languages of Islam, the Arabic language, the Persian, and Turkish. At the socio-political level, by transforming the energy of Islam from traditional institutions, traditional learning centers like Al-Azhar, Zaytuna, Qarawin, Qom, to the modern institutions and universities. So the language of Islam transforms into traditional institutions to the modern institution. This has happened the first time in history. This means that the energy of Islam is no longer functioning within the traditional sectors of the society, traditional institutions, but is becoming, functioning and active within the modern institutions of the society. And this means that Islam is becoming associated with the process of modernization. Of course, there are many shortcomings in the discourse of Muslim reformists, but they set the ground for reshaping modernity within an Islamic framework and references. And this is the importance of Al-Afghani, Abdu, Rashid Rida, and many others reformists, since we are, in one sense or another, their students and disciples, whether we agree or disagree with them. Either we agree with Al-Afghani, Abdu, Rashid Rida, or disagree, we are our disciples and the students. Because the reformist movement since the 19th century opened the gate, opened the possibility of the process of modernization in the Muslim world. And the language of Islam, the functioning of Islam, becoming more and more accommodating itself within no longer traditional milieu with in modern context, modern milieu, modern institutions. And I think I have to stop here and open the floor to discussion and comments. Thank you very much. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rafiq. This is an excellent presentation, and I think this is a very good summary of the book also. Still, there is a lot of things in the book I think we did not debate, we did not talk about them, especially some of the contribution by, for example, Habermas and McIntyre and other political theorists. Now I will ask Weiss. Weiss, are you ready? Weiss? Okay. Then we will start now the question and discussion. Who would like to start?
I'm here, Fadi. I'm here.
Okay, Weiss will be commenting on the book. Yes, please. 5 minutes, Weiss.
Thank you very much for your talk. I really appreciate your insights. I think you trace a very interesting story of. Can you hear me? Is my
yes, but we cannot see you somehow. Okay.
We hear you, but we don't see you.
Weiss? Okay.
Hello? Fadi, I think I'm
yes,
getting some technical problems. Maybe you can continue and I will.
Okay. Okay.
I will come back.
Okay.
Give me 5 minutes, I'll be back on.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, who would like to start the questions, discussion? Yes? Okay, then I will ask you some. Now, when we look at the project of Ta Abdul Rahman, I think Ta Abdul Rahman is one of the most important philosophers talking about modernity in the Muslim world, in the Arab world. And Ta Abdul Rahman wrote 2 or 3 volumes on modernity. And one of the questions he was asking, like, do we have the right to have a different modernity? And then he was saying, yes, we have the German modernity, we have the American modernity. So the question was, what is unique about Islamic modernity, right? And then he proposed the idea of faith and ethics. So he said, we have something unique in our Muslim civilization. We can contribute to modernity, right? And this is the thing that you also debate in the last part of your book about the contribution of, especially debating the book After Virtue. So I will ask you about what do you think about the relation between modernity and ethics? Can you a little bit explain whether you agree with Abdul Rahman? I know he was your professor a long time ago, right? And how you orient or locate McIntyre within this debate?
Yes, I think I fully agree with Professor Taha Abdurrahman, my professor. Actually, I learned from him a lot. You know, I was one of his students in Morocco, and his question is legitimate. The question: do we have the right, you know, to modernity? Of course, we have the right to modernity. But I tried, you know, to move a little bit forward, not just, you know, to say that have you the right or not having that right to modernity. Actually, we have the right to make ijtihad to modernity. And I said this. Maybe the only difference that I have with Dr. Taha Abdurrahman speaks about what he called, you know, the spirit of modernity, the spirit, ruh al-hadath. I mentioned that hadath is not just spirit. There are different spirits of modernity. Not only the spirit of modernity, but spirits of modernity, arwah al-hadath. Because since there is no single, you know, form or ideal model of modernity, even theoretically speaking. I think more than 10 years ago, I published a paper entitled, "Are Non-Secular Modernity Possible?" One of the greatest challenge that faces the process of modernity all over the world is the relationship between modernity and secularity. Are non-secular modernity possible or not? Yes, it is possible. I think the conception or the view that we are living in over-secularized world is questionable. To say that modernity and secularity are moving in parallel, hand in hand, is not very accurate. One of the clever remarks that was made by Ernest Gellner, the British, you know, sociologist, when he speaks about the disconnection between the process of modernization and secularization in the Muslim world. If you look at the most modernized sector of the society, the most dedicated, they are not necessarily secularized. And secularized in the sense of nihilism, because, you know, maybe secularity started with some combination, mixture with religious, you know, connotations or religious references, but in advancing secularity, it has no longer, you know, any connection with religion. It's becoming, it transformed in Nietzschean nihilism. Can we say that the general trend in the Muslim world is moving towards nihilism? It's not accurate at all. One of the renovation of modernity in the Muslim world is to dismantle or disconnect what is considered as necessary connection between secularity and modernity.
Okay, thank you very much. Now Weiss is ready.
About McIntyre. I think the approach of McIntyre in his work over post-virtue, I think, is very important. But I'm in doubt that classical morality, Aristotelian morality, has the ability and the capacity to defeat the Nietzschean or the Weberian morality within Western context. It will be very difficult to go back to the Aristotelian concept of. But of course, for McIntyre, it's more complicated. His approach is not, you know, just to go back to Aristotle, but to revive, Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle, the concept of virtue within the classical age. It will be very difficult in the process of modernity, because modernity dismantled the foundations of the traditional society, including the system of morality. It is no longer possible within a Western context to go back to the, you know, pre-Christian era, or even, you know, pre-modern era based on the values or system of principles of values, you know, traditional or classical one.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, your critique in the book are very clear about this. Also, okay, Weiss now.
Dr. Abdul Salam, thank you very much for your talk, and I wanted to welcome you to CIGA as well. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today with you in person. I had a couple of questions. Let me start with the one that I think I felt was missing from your talk. You did mention a little bit about disenchantment, the Weberian understanding of the onset of modernity. I have, but your title of your book and a good part of your book talks about religion, and in this whole process of modernity. I mean, especially the role of God. So I wanted to ask you, as we experienced colonial modernity as Muslims, both Arabs and non-Arabs, what was in your view, what was the unique experience that we had in terms of secularization and secularity? I mean, Tunisia is a very hybrid example, your country, of being both in Africa. So African anti-colonialist theorists have often depicted the project of modernity as a racist project, one which institutes what Du Bois called the color line. And but I think there's also a story about how colonial modernity imposes a general secularization. I think that's what you meant when you were talking earlier about the Weberian story. So how does this secularization, this theoretical experience, actually translate on the ground with Muslims? How do you see our particular story in this grand narrative?
Thank you very much. Very important question. What are the inventions of the Muslim world to the process of modernity in modern times? Mainly, if you go back to the Nietzschean term, disenchantment of the world. Of course, it's quite clear, within the dominant narrative or narratives of modernity, that the disenchantment of the world is necessarily one of the pillars of element or foundation of the process of modernity. But we can't escape from the process of disenchantment. Disenchantment means to deprive the world from any religious meaning. So Weber speaks about, disenchantment in the sense, to transform the world in a flat cosmos, which is, deprived from any religious connotation or religious meaning. I think the main invention that could be, given by the Muslim world is to give meaning to this meaningless world. I think there is a general tendency within the modern times towards meaningless or nihilism as one aspect, if not, the spirit of the modern times, to move from religious, meanings to a meaningless world when, the values and the meanings are absent from this world. I think the religious meaning is still very present in the minds and hearts of Muslims, as well in the reality of the Muslim societies. Of course, there is a solid fact, the process of secularization is a universal one, but at the same time, there is a process of desecularization. One of the invention maybe that coming from the Muslim world is the disenchantment, not the disenchantment of the world, but desecularization of the world by giving religious meaning to the public and the private life, not only within the private sphere, but to the public life as a whole. So this is the first invention or creativity that may come from the Muslim world. If you look at the second question related to the process of secularization in some Arab or Muslim countries, mainly North African countries, secularity is not, a per se concept. It's not an abstract concept. If you look at secularity as it is, embodied in the political process, socio-political process, the general assumption that secularity or secularization is deeply associated with democratization, which is not accurate. It's completely the inverse, at least in many Arab and Muslim countries. Secularity was deeply associated with political despotism. And this is what I called, a despotic secularity. And if you look at the controversy and even the dynamism in Turkey, there is a conflicting, process between a despotic secularity and democratic secularity, for the simple reason that secularity imposes itself in Turkey, in modern Turkey, And the conflict is no longer between just religious and secularity, but within the interpretation of secularity itself. So Muslims are competing a despotic, in Turkey, despotic top-down form of secularity, reaction and movements that coming from the grassroots of the society against this despotic form of secularity. So we can say there is a conflicting, process between despotic secularity and democratic secularity. In other countries like North African countries, secularity is not necessarily, the ultimate answer to the challenges and to the problems that you're facing. Secularity transformed in the despotism of the elite, which controls the state apparatus, state means, and try to impose a top-down process of secularization. So to say that secularity is deeply associated, connected with democracy is a mere illusion. It's a myth. So there are different forms of secularity, as well as different forms of religion. Religion could be associated with political despotism, as well could be associated with the process of democratization. There is no religion per se, as well. There is no secularity or secularization per se. Secularity is associated with a certain socio-political process. It could be connected with the intention, with the tendency towards democratization, as well. It could be associated with the political despotism and dictatorship.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we will have a question. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rafiq Abdeslam. This is a good discourse with the modernity, and I attend to hear about good and meaning. It's a good title. The meaning from whom? This is the main problem, I think. From whom the meaning is be created. Secularity, there is a real problem. In the 18th century, there is a good connection between kings and philosophy. I think Frederick II said to Wolf, you are to create the concept, and we kings, we have to do what you think. There is this good relation between the two, the kings and the philosopher. Despotism. This period is the period of the Enlightenment, and is it the period of the despotism? Now, we are in the Arabic countries in the period of the despotism. We can't speak, or we can't talk about modernity when there is a real despotism in our countries. I think many, as you say, we can't live outside modernity. There is no escape from modernity. It's real, yes. And all Arabs are with these ideas. There is no idea for living in modernity is living on the earth now. But we think that there is a special way for modernity from the Occidentals. Chinese and all those who have a little modernity or another kind of modernity, they imitate, I think. There is no modernity abroad, or no modernity in secularization. Secularity is the base of modernity of in our centuries. I think even there is a real problem for Muslims and Arabs in special is to affront despotism, and the revolution is the first moment to deal or to speak after this about modernity. God and meaning. The meaning for Muslims is from God, who create the world, has do the meaning of the world, who creates the world. He gave us the meaning of world, all the meaning. And in this period of modernity in the 18th century, there are many in political, there are rationality, subjectivity, progress. All these words are from the man, not from God. This is a good. This is the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saeed. I fully agree. Modernity is not necessarily associated with democracy or emancipation, as it was, declared in the declared in the Enlightenment tradition and by modernist thinkers. Even within the Weberian context, when Max Weber speaks about the iron cage of modernity, modernity does not mean necessarily to emancipate human beings. If you look at the bureaucracy and the constraints that was imposed by totalitarian regime within the communist, states in the previous era, it is communism is the byproduct of the process of modernity, modernization. So when Max Weber speaks about the iron cage of modernity, it is quite clear that it was translated and implemented when the totalitarian regimes, when they used, the most sophisticated instrumental rationality to unsiege the society, individuals and society. It's rationalized constraints, rationalized cages, let's say, in the Weberian language or Weberian terminology. The challenge of despotism in the Muslim world is, I think, one of the greatest challenge that we are facing during the last 2 centuries. The Muslim world is political despotism. This is maybe due to the shift in the balance of power between society and state. Modernization provides the modern state by means of controls and monopoly. So the society, the civil society, the social and political forces were unsieged and still unsieged by a despotic state, a modern or modernized state apparatus, when the state, encircle the society and individuals. And this is one of the shortcomings and misfunctioning of modernization in the Muslim world, and more particularly in the Arab world. So modernization in the Arab world is and still associated with monopoly, with dictatorship, with the state, control of the society, top-down, process of modernization where the state has the ability to control the society as a whole. What is the invention of Islam in the modern times? I think the main invention of Islam, not in the technology or in science, because technology and science are universal. There is no Chinese or Muslim or European science. Science is science at the end of the day. The invention of the Muslim civilization and the Islamic religion is to give meaning, as I said before, to this meaningless world. The Chinese are creative in the sense, they imitate, and they're creative in the second stage from the Western modernity. The Russians as well. And there is a general tendency to speak about, cultural specificity for the Chinese as well the Russians, what is called, the Eurasian culture, for example. But I think modernity in Western contexts imposes itself in different, parts of the globe. Maybe the Muslim world is very exceptional in the sense that religious meaning, religious value is still very active. And this is the invention of Islam or the Islamic civilization to modernity, to give religious meaning, to give immorality to this immoral world, let's say. Maybe this is the main invention could be done by the Islamic civilization, like, the previous era in the beginning of Islam, the main invention compared to the Persian or Greek civilizations, that Islam adapted the previous civilization, but it gives its own marks, its own imprints. And I think the main invention of the Islamic civilization to give religious meaning and religious morality to this world, which is deprived from religious meaning and any, any tendency. Actually, this is the effect of nihilism. Nihilism is becoming a strong phenomenon and even an escapable phenomenon in Western capitals, mainly for the young generation. So I think, and I repeat, the main invention of Islam could be to give morality and meaning to this worldless world.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Omar Tashkatarin.
Thank you for your talk. And I missed the first part, so based on the one I listened, if I didn't misunderstand, I think this book is making a case for Islamic modernity. Did I understand it correctly? If yes, if it is making a case for Islamic modernity, and my question is like, what is the place of democracy within this Islamic modernity? Because like modernity is a very big concept, and it includes a lot of things, but more specifically, if you can say like, what would you say about democracy? Like if, in your conception of Islamic modernity, is the democracy similar to the Western democracy, or in your vision, it has differences? In which way is it difference? That is what I was wondering. Thank you.
I think more particularly or precise, I'm speaking about Islamic modernities more than Islamic modernity, since there is no single or there are no single experience or model of modernity. As I said before, modernity is an unfinished project. If I use the Habermasian term, this means that there are different horizons, different perspectives in the process of modernity or modernization. There is no single experience, including the Muslim world. Maybe different ways, different gates to move through, to move forward or to acquire modernity. What is the relationship between modernity and democracy? I think there is a deep connection between modernity and democracy. One of the achievements of the modern times is democracy. But what do you mean by democracy? Democracy as instrumental mechanism, the check and balance powers. One of the creativity of the modernity is the mechanism of democracy, the alteration of power, the separation of powers, which is maybe constructed systematically, built by Montesquieu, but you have its origins even in Ibn Khaldun al-Muqaddimah, when he speaks about power balance, although he speaks about al-Asabiyya, but this could give some inclinations towards the balance of power, separation of powers. The Islamic concept, mainly within the Sunni tradition, that al-hukm aqd or sulta aqd, the idea of contract, the relation between the ruler and the ruled, based on certain contract. Of course, the Muslim fuqaha and jurists, deformed maybe the concept of contract, since the balance of power was in all times was in favor of the rulers, or de facto rules they imposed themselves. That's why they made the kind of syllogism parallel between the contract of marriage and the contract of ruling the state. يعني قياس بين عقد الزواج وبين عقد الحكم, which is misleading. But I think democracy, modern democracy, provide us as Muslims with some mechanisms that could function within an Islamic framework and Islamic system. But there are at the same time different forms of democracy. The liberal democracy is one example, one model amongst others, to say that democracy is needed and valid, and it functions within different cultural and civilizational contexts. It functions in the United States with the religious Protestant context. It functions in India. It functions in Turkey, in Iran in some aspect. why not, to have different experiences of democratization within an Islamic framework and Islamic context? It could be. It's not only theoretical possibility. It is a fact that we have seen a different experience of democratization in different Muslim countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, Iran, Tunisia. In some aspect, although we're facing, now, coming back, unfortunately, to the era of despotism. But this gives us a possibility that democracy could function within an Islamic context and Islamic references.
Yes, Dr. Rafiq, according to the book, or especially the last part of the book, why did the writer, you consider that the Ummah is enabled to impose its condition or add to the philosophy of modernity at the present time, especially since Muslim countries such as Turkey or Malaysia, Qatar, and other hold like 25% of global economy. Like Malik ibn Nabi, he said that the basis of economy, the basis of civilization is the economy. So I think the problem of the Islamic world lies to tyrannical regime. As mentioned by Muslim thinker Abdurrahman al-Kawakbi, who considered that the nation's main crisis lies in tyranny regime. So the question here also the Ummah is right to a dictatorial regime. What will prevent it from leading a civilization or reform another civilization?
I fully agree about this scrutiny of your scrutiny about the modern conditions of the Muslim world is accurate. We are facing many problems and crises, even illness in the Muslim world. One of these greatest problems is the problem of despotism, political despotism and dictatorship in different, parts of the Muslim world, with some exception here and there. But the general climate in the Muslim world is mainly, associated with the political despotism. But I think this is one of the problems. There are other problems. One of the greatest challenge that faces the Muslim world is political disintegration. And this is what makes, the Muslim world and mainly the Arab world weak and fragile in the balance of power, because they are not living in idealized or ideal world. We are living in international order, which is based on competition and even conflict. And the country will impose themselves within the international order, who have the means of powers. If you look at the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, even Europe, they are in process, to move from the nation state to the concept of continental appartenance, for the simple reason that Europe finds itself fragile in international order, which is based on a competition between mega power or great powers. So this is one of the greatest challenges that faces the Muslim world. Although many Muslim countries are producers of energy, they have the primary energy, which is very crucial to the international industry and economy. But politically speaking, they're disintegrated and, full disarray. And this is one of the greatest, challenges that facing the Muslim. And that's why I focus my view not to modernity as a theoretical concepts or, ideals, to modernity as it is functioning on the ground. As I said before, modernity is deeply associated, connected with power and authority. If you don't acquire the meaning of the means of power, you can't compete in this world, and you can't acquire modernity. Modernity is mainly, the control of mechanisms of power, and to defend your interest in this competitive international world.
Before we move to the last two questions, I have a question, because in one part in the book you explain that the problem for the Muslim to adjust with modernity is the claim for universality, right? The Muslim claim that our value is universal, and at the same time, Western are claiming to be universal. So how we solve this problem? Two different civilizations claiming the universality of their values. We can move to one or two questions more, and then we give you the last final word.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I have 4 questions. Yeah. So should I ask it like one by one? One by one? Okay. 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 So so we know that the spirits of modernity, as you said, Dr. Rafiq, we can say that is like to believe in meaning, to believe in progress, to believe that a human is the center of the cosmos, of the world. But the first modernity, I mean the classical modernity, was based on worshipping the reason. Like the reason is the most incredible power that we should trust. And that's why the first modernity, it rejected the religion and the ethics. So yeah, so the question, yeah. So that's why it didn't like survive a lot, and it was like destroyed by the post-modernity theory. So what do you think about the post-modernity theory? That's my first question. Doesn't like it shows the weakness of the classical vision of modernity, and especially when it introduced like the idea, the reason, the progress, the subjectivity, and all of those meanings. So this is my first question. My second question. Yeah, okay. So in which meaning the modernity is considered as a need today in our societies? Like which modernity we need today in Arabs and Muslim countries? My third question. Yeah, what were the aspects of the modernity in the Ottoman state? So you were talking about this. And my last question, how can you explain the fact that there is not a lot of, or maybe like there is not a lot of or successful steps from the Islamic intellectuals to rethink the theory of modernity when it's like it becomes a real need, like for our societies, like to survive. Yeah. Okay. How can you explain the fact that there is not a lot or a successful steps from our Muslim intellectuals to rethink the theory of modernity?
Okay, thank you. Just I will go straight to the point. Dr. Rafiq, in your book, as far as I remember, as far as I read some books or titles of books related to modernity from thinkers and philosophers, especially in the Muslim world, I see that there is a huge gap between thinking about conceptual issues as modernity and something like this, and theory of international relations and power and balance of power. And I see in your book that you include some words and some words related to international relation, like geopolitics and power and balance of power. And I think that you want to narrow the gap between modernity and thinking about modernity and international relation. I think I want to ask you about your aim and your goal to show the side of international relation in your book.
Very important questions. I try to be, brief. Classical modernity, which is based on the concept of reason. Yes, classical modernity within the Enlightenment tradition, it transformed reason in a dogma. It is no longer, possible to defend the Kantian or the Hegelian concept of reason as something transcendental. There was a shift from the dogma of religion to the dogma of rationality. The concept of reason is a secularized theology, Christian theology, as mentioned by many thinkers, including Carl Schmitt and many other Western or European thinkers who declared or said, highlighted the relationship between the process of secularization and religious dogmatism. Which model of modernity we need? as I said in this work, modernity is not a recipe, a ready-made recipe that we said, we need such or such modernity. Modernity is a process. It is accumulated within historical context, and each society creates its own modernity based on its priority and needs. And this is the real challenge in the Muslim world, how to create modernity which speaks the language and the spirit of the people, which is accommodated and associated with the needs and the local context of the people. What are the examples of the modernity within the Ottoman context? I think the Ottomans, like any other, previous or great powers, faced the challenge and even the defeat from the Western powers. They try to imitate. If you can't, compete them, join them. Based on this, mechanisms. They tried in the beginning, to reject the process of modernization. Then, in the era of Tanzimat, they discovered that there is no escape from modernity, because Western modernity, which is translated in modern army, they discovered modernity in the barracks and the military conflict. So the Ottoman power had no ability to defeat, since the Vienna siege, the first Vienna siege in the end, I think, of the 17th centuries. They discovered that there is an emerging powers. Since the era of Ibn Khaldun, actually, Ibn Khaldun speaks about the emergence of the Franja. But it's like, something, it's not based on concrete facts. The Franja are far away, but he has a certain, by instinct, he had feelings at that time that the Franja are in the process of advance. But in modern times, in the beginning of the 18th century, the Ottomans discovered that they were not only discovered, they on the ground, they were defeated by military European powers. So they tried to imitate, to face the challenge of the powers coming from European countries by modernization of the army, modernization of the administration. There is nothing, special about, the process of modernization in Turkey. But I said before, there were a possibility to succeed in this process of modernization, like the Japanese in the Meiji family, who succeed to imitate Western modernization, and then they defeat the Russians later on, in the 18th century, because they learned, they were good students from the school of the West, let's say. But Turkey was defeated for the simple reason that it is very close, the proximity, the element of geography is very important here. Turkey is very close to Europe, so it was militarily defeated. And that's why the process of modernization, at least in the first stage, does not succeed in Turkey. How do you explain the failure of modernity in the Muslim world? As I said before, we failed for the simple reason that, as I said, the balance of power is not in favor of the Arab and the Muslim world. But history is not finished. It's a process of accumulation. In the 18th, 19th century, European and Western thinkers and philosophers speak about the Oriental despotism. And China was the hallmark of political and social stagnation. It's seen as, a stagnant society with no creativity. But this is becoming modern China shatters these myths or postulates, for the simple reason that China is becoming an emerging force and very dynamic and even competing with Western countries. So the last question of Najmuddin, it's very important also. Yes, actually, there is a huge gap between the theories of modernity and the discourse of modernity and international relations. Generally speaking, the thinkers and philosophers, writers in the Arab and Muslim worlds, they speak about modernity like, ready-made recipe. Theory of modernity. We are not modern enough for the simple reason that we didn't understand the complexity of the norms and terms of modernity, rationality, subjective. We are not rational enough. We are not secular enough. And that's why we are defeated. And our history is accumulation of failure. I discredit this view. And that's why it's very important to articulate international relations, the meaning of powers, the balance of powers, and the theory of modernity. Because I said before, modernity is not just a theoretical theoretical concepts or abstract theories. Modernity is, at the end of the day, about power, authority, and even conflict. And that's why it's very important for the students and experts in the field of international relations, to be active within the theory of modernity. It's not up to the philosophers or sociologists to speak about modernity and modernization. Oh, yeah. Well, it's a big problem, to be honest with you. I think one of the greatest dilemma between what is called the West or Europe and the Muslim world is the claim to universality. The West has a strong claim to universality, which is based on Christianity itself, the secularized, concept of modernity, where mainly, derives from the secularized, Christian norms and values. Christianity, even within the Bavarian context, when Max Weber speaks about, he speaks in the capitalism and the spirit of capitalism, which is based on the secularized secularity or reformed Christianity. The Luther with Luther and Calvin, the Protestant movement as a catalyst, force within the process of modernization and the emergence of modern capitalism and modern state. There is a strong claim to universality, but Islam also has considered itself as universal religion, and one of the greatest, also challenge and even, competition between Islam and the secularity, and in Islam and modernity, that Islam also considered itself as the accumulation and the apogee of religion, monotheistic religion. It was born after Christianity, the Abrahamic tradition, monarchic tradition that started with Ibrahim, Judaism and Christianity. Islam considered itself as the apogee of monotheism. And this is really one of the greatest challenges, that the competing claims to universality between Islam and secularity, between secularized Christianity, and even, Islam, if it will be secularized, also I doubt that Islam will be secularized, but it's a real dilemma and a real challenge.
Thank you very much. This is an excellent presentation. And this is, by the way, our first book discussion in CIGA after Corona. Usually we do it online, and this is the first time. We are happy to have all of you, and thank you again for coming. Thank you for your excellent presentation, and inshallah see you in our next book discussion. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.